Okay, so this is Screencast 17 of the RCS PTM Term 3 classes. Hopefully you all still have some semblance of your name in letters that were about 1,000 millimeters high. Well, not about, they were 1,000 millimeters high. If you don't have this, pause this, go away, recreate that, and then come back and join in again. Because what we're about to do is we're about to start the concept, or introduce the concept of sheet layers into our workflow. So we've created these letters about 1,000 millimeters high in our design layer, and because the design layer is infinite, you know, we could have made those 10 miles high or 10 millimeters high. It doesn't really matter. What we now need to do is kind of place these letters or this object or whatever you've drawn onto a sheet layer, which will have a real dimension. It'll be a sheet of A4, A3, and then we need to decide on the scale that we're going to represent these on the piece of paper, depending on the size of the piece of paper. So I'm sure it's a fairly obvious concept that if these were huge letters and we were placing them on a sheet of A4 or a drawing of a full venue on the sheet of A4, the scale would be tiny or huge, whichever way you want to think about it. Likewise, if these were only millimeters high and we were placing them onto a big sheet of A0, like drawing of circuitry or something like that, then the scale would be completely opposite. It doesn't really matter the size of the objects in the design layer. What really matters is our scale and our sheet layer. So in order to create a sheet layer, we go to Tools, Organization, Sheet Layers. So along the top here, sheet layers. We don't have any sheet layers, so we're going to create a new sheet layer. Sheet number 1, sheet title, call it whatever you want. Helps if you spell your name correctly. We're going to edit the properties of the sheet layer because we haven't told the sheet layer how big it wants to be yet, or it's going to be. Sheet number, sheet title, stacking order. The raster rendering may be important. I just did another little tutorial this morning, not part of this series, on why that's important, so you can find that on the Vectorworks channel. The page setup, we're going to leave we're going to leave one printer page in here because we're going to choose the size of A4 landscape from within my own printer, which that's the one attached to my computer at the moment. The reason I said to leave that is sometimes I found, it used to be the case, I haven't checked it for a while, but it used to be the case that if you had A4 selected in here and A4 selected in the printer setup, there you would sometimes get a couple of extra blank pages because of the difference between Vectorworks' broad understanding of what A4 is and its dimensions and the printer's ability to actually print. So I think different printers are able to print like millimeters difference in the printer setup. So it's always worth, again, this is just my thing, it's always worth leaving the printer selected here if you have one, and one printer page selected here. If of course you're dealing with, you want to make a PDF which is bigger than the printer. So the printer here, I only have A4, that's all I can do. That's the biggest I can do on my printer because it's just a small home printer. If I want to do A3 or something, I would need to choose the size on the variable and then choose A3 here. The only thing I'm saying is not to have A4 and A4 or A3 and A3 if your printer is able to do A3, to allow one of them to do the calculation. Anyway, I've rabbited on long enough about that. So we have once we've created this, we've created the size, and we go OK, and it looks like we've lost all our work, but that's okay because all we've done is create a blank sheet layer. That's fine. Down in the navigation on the right hand side there, we can see, have a look at these buttons on the top. What we have is classes. We haven't gone into classes yet, we haven't gone into layers yet, although we know we have drawn our name on design layer 1 because we have to draw it somewhere. And sheet layers, we've created sheet layer 1, which we haven't put anything on. So if you go back to the layers, double click design layer, you can go back into here again. Likewise, exactly the same, up in the top bar here, we can jump between sheet layer 1 and design layer by changing up here. Doesn't matter which way you do it. So I need to send this to the sheet layer. So I need to say to Vectorworks, view, create viewport. So that's the Vectorworks' name of the photograph, if you like, a live photograph of our design layer object, which we will then give a scale to and set on the sheet layer, which is an actual piece of paper. So I'll go over those concepts again and again and again. I'm going to leave these two ticks. Sometimes I tell people not to, but in this case I'm going to leave them on for reasons that will become obvious in a minute. I'm going to guess at 1 to 25 scale. It doesn't matter, we can change all this later. Top plan view, because we're looking at 2D objects, that's fine. We don't have any rendering, so just do OK. And that's placed our viewport. So this is a viewport on a sheet layer. The sheet layer is A4 and the viewport can be moved around the sheet layer. The viewport can be any scale we like, so if I look across on the right hand side in the object info palette, let's make it a little bit bigger, let's make it 1 to 20, which is good. And the reason I left that drawing title on it was when I changed the scale it automatically updated, so there's no danger of us needing to write down in the bottom here what the scale is, and then deciding we want to change that to 1 to 10 and then forgetting to change the scale on the drawing. It's really important that we mark, it's critical that we mark the scale on our drawing at all times. So I need to dimension this. I need to, if these letters are going to be cut out of material, whether that be soft material or wood or something like that, I need to give some dimensions. Because I've got a scale, I could export this as PDF just now, and someone could take a scale ruler to it and would be able to measure using a scale ruler what those heights are. But we have the ability to do dimensioning in here. Like most people, when they're demoing this, I'm going to demo it wrong first to show you what not to do. So in our basic tool palette, as long as we're in the Spotlight workspace, we have these dimensioning tools, and if you don't have that, then there's a dimensioning tool set down the bottom, which again has constrained and unconstrained dimensions and lots of other things in it. We have our basic ones here, and to be honest, most of the time this is all we need. How not to do it is to click the top and bottom of these letters and do that, because that's telling me that that's 50 millimeters. We know that's not 50 millimeters because we made them 1000 millimeters. What that has measured is the length of that line on a piece of A4 paper, and that's not what I'm interested in. What I need to do is I need to double click and go into the annotation of the viewport. Because the viewport has a scale, then when I click, then the viewport understands that that was 50 millimeters, and it's doing the multiplication times 20 to give us 1000. So it's doing all the maths for us. It's still measured the same line, but it understands it has a scale, and it doesn't matter. Sorry, excuse me. It doesn't matter what scale I choose. This will measure 1000 because I want to know the size of the actual letters. If you find that you've got thick lines, it may be because we were playing around with lines in the previous drawing, so I'm just going to put that back to a more standard thin line there. So I can just change the length of line. Likewise, you can make your lines coloured. These are all editable. I wouldn't recommend it because there's absolutely no reason to do that, but just saying that it's editable like everything else. So I can give some of these dimensions. I can give the arc here a radial dimension, because again, if we were wanting to build this, that's probably a useful thing for carpenters or anybody else, somebody cutting out material, to know what that radius is. If that R radius 236 is kind of sitting across the arrow at the moment, which looks a bit ugly, and I can't move it, you can hear it all clicking away. So what I can do on this one is modify ungroup. Are you sure you want to ungroup high level objects? Yes. And now that the radius number and the arrow have been separated by ungrouping, I can then move that up and out of the way to make it look a little bit better. Okay, this is going to be a slightly longer screencast, so I apologise about that. There's a couple of other things I wanted to show, and I may as well do them here. I'm going to move the drawing title out of the way down there, so that it's not necessarily stuck to the bottom. There's a couple of other things within the constrained linear dimension. We have a chain dimension and a baseline dimension, and the standard. So the standard one I used first. I'll just go over that again, which was the sequence was the click. The Z key is sometimes quite useful. If I click the Z key, you can see I get a zoom in on the corner, and then I click the Z key again, and then click. So it allows me to kind of get a temporary zoom into corners without having to zoom in and out of my drawing using the zoom function. So that can be really useful. So it was click, click, move out, and then place. So the mouse move was to define this dimension here, this distance here, sorry. The chain dimension, again, just play with these, I'm just showing you them, is click, click, define the, let's make the size the right size to start with this time. So I go back, and if I make sure the size is there before I start, it should be okay this time. So I'm going to click, click, set the distance away from the object, click. Now because this is a chain, I'm just going click, 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 double click to finish. So that's a useful way of doing some sort of chain dimension. If we want to change the size of the text, there's a text font size, change it down to 10, and it might be a little neater. The 200 is still sitting there, kind of annoying me there. But the idea here is to get into the sequence, the button click sequence. So try that. The baseline dimension, kind of the same thing. Click, click, defines the offset, and then the next click will continue click, 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 click to reference off that very first, double click to finish that very first baseline. So this might be useful for measuring things upstage or something. So I just want you to have a play with that. There's an angle dimension here, which the first option there is between two edges. So we've got two edges of a V there, which we might want to define what that angle is. And a couple of other things within here. Play around with your dimensioning. There are different standards, ways of doing things, different styles. These lines here are called witness lines, so if I don't want to see that, I can switch the witness lines off and then just move that down a little bit. Kind of knocked it off. It's a bit squinty now. But yeah. So what I want you to do is, once you finish dimensioning, exit the viewport viewport annotations, and then you'll be placed on back into your sheet layer again. And because the dimensions are within the viewport, it doesn't matter where you put the viewport. The dimensions will be inside it, if you like. That's all we're going to do just now, because that's over 14 minutes, and that's the longest screencast we've done yet. The next stage will be to export this as a PDF. We're going to put a sheet border on the title block and then export it as a PDF. Okay, so I'll see you on that one in a minute.